Nightmares are a mysterious and often terrifying aspect of the human experience, offering a glimpse into the deepest recesses of the subconscious mind. They can take on a myriad of forms, from mundane anxieties to otherworldly terrors, and leave us feeling shaken and vulnerable upon waking. In our nightmares, we are forced to confront our deepest fears and darkest desires, whether we are ready for it or not. And yet, despite the fear they inspire, nightmares also hold a strange allure, drawing us back into their twisted, surreal landscapes time and time again. Perhaps it is the thrill of the unknown or the promise of unlocking some hidden truth about ourselves that keeps us coming back, seeking out the strange and unsettling visions that await us in the darkness of our dreams. That being said, let's look at some stories that will give you the chills. Story number 1. I woke up gasping for air, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I tried to sit up, but my body would not move. I was trapped, completely paralyzed, and I knew I wasn't alone. It was the worst nightmare of my life, the one that had plagued me since childhood. Every time it came, I would try to will myself awake, but I could never escape it. And now, here it was again, more vivid and terrifying than ever before. I could hear breathing, heavy and ragged, coming from the shadows in the corner of the room. I could not see anything, but I knew it was there, watching me, waiting for me to make a move. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it a ghost, a demon, or something even worse? I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead, and I tried to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat. Suddenly, the breathing stopped. There was a long, agonizing silence, and then I heard footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, getting closer and closer until I could feel hot breath on my face. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it would be over soon, but then I felt a cold, bony hand wrap around my ankle. It pulled me towards the edge of the bed, and I realized with horror that I was being dragged into the darkness. I struggled, trying to break free, but the grip was too strong. I could feel the cold, clammy skin of my attacker, and I knew that whatever it was not human. As I was pulled into the abyss, I heard a deep, guttural voice whisper in my ear, "You will never escape me. I will be with you always." And then I woke up, drenched in sweat, with a feeling of dread that lingered long after the nightmare had ended. Story number 2. Leela had always been prone to nightmares. Every night, she would toss and turn, plagued by terrifying visions that seemed to come straight from the depths of her own mind. At first, she tried to brush it off, convincing herself that it was just a phase or a passing bout of insomnia. But as the nights wore on and the nightmares became more vivid and unsettling, she began to wonder if there was something more to it. One night, she dreamt that she was wandering through a dark, shadowy forest. The trees loomed over her like giant sentinels, and the air was thick with an eerie silence that made her skin crawl. As she walked, she could feel something watching her, following her through the trees. She tried to run, but her legs felt like lead, and she could hear the footsteps getting closer and closer. And then she saw it, a figure emerging from the shadows, tall and gaunt, with eyes that glowed like embers. It reached out a hand, beckoning her closer, and Leela felt a cold, creeping fear grip her heart. She tried to scream, but her voice was silenced by the sound of creaking branches and rustling leaves. And then she woke up, panting and trembling, with the feeling of those bony fingers still lingering on her skin. The nightmares continued, each one more disturbing and unsettling than the last. Leela tried to ignore them, but she could not shake the feeling that something was trying to reach out to her from beyond the veil of sleep. One day, she decided to confide in her friend, Emma, who was an expert in all things supernatural. Emma listened intently to Leela's story, nodding thoughtfully as she spoke. "I think you are being haunted," Emma said finally. "There are spirits out there that can cross over into our world through our dreams, and once they get a foothold in your mind, it's hard to get rid of them." Leela's blood ran cold. She had always been skeptical of the paranormal, But now, faced with the possibility that her nightmares were more than just her own imagination, she did not know what to think. That night, she tried to stay awake, but the exhaustion finally caught up with her, and she drifted off into an uneasy sleep. And once again, she found herself wandering through the shadowy forest, with something watching her from the darkness. This time, however, she was ready. She turned to face the figure, steeling herself for whatever was to come. And as she did, she felt a surge of power, a strength that seemed to come from deep within her. The figure recoiled, retreating into the shadows, and Leela knew that she had won. She had faced her fears and come out stronger on the other side. From that night on, Leila's nightmares began to fade. She still had the occasional bad dream, but she no longer felt helpless or alone. And as she drifted off to sleep each night, she knew that she was strong enough to face whatever came her way, even in the darkest corners of her own mind. Story number 3. Ever since he was a child, Ethan had suffered from sleep paralysis. He would wake up in the middle of the night, completely paralyzed, unable to move or even scream for help. At first, he tried to brush it off as a weird quirk of his imagination, but as he got older, the episodes became more frequent and more terrifying. He would feel like he was suffocating, like something was sitting on his chest, crushing him with its weight. And then there were the figures that would visit him during his episodes. They were always the same, tall, dark shapes that hovered at the edge of his vision, their eyes gleaming like orbs of fire. Ethan tried to tell his parents about it, but they dismissed it as just another nightmare. They did not understand the terror that gripped him every time he felt those cold, bony fingers closing around his throat. One night, the figures came again, but this time they were different. They were more solid, more real, and Ethan could see them more clearly than ever before. He could see their twisted features, their sunken eyes, and the long, claw-like fingers that reached out to him from the darkness. And then one of them spoke, in a voice that was both cold and cruel. "You belong to us now," it said, its voice echoing through the silence of the room. "We have been waiting for you, Ethan, waiting for you to let your guard down." Ethan tried to scream, but his throat was constricted, and no sound escaped his lips. The figures advanced on him, their shadows swallowing him whole. And then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, they were gone. Ethan was alone again, the weight lifted from his chest, his limbs freed from their paralysis. But the terror remained, a cold, lingering fear that stayed with him long after the episode had passed. Ethan knew that he was not alone, that there was something out there waiting for him in the darkness. From that night on, he slept with the lights on, afraid of what he might see if he let his guard down. But the figures still came, night after night, and Ethan knew that he was trapped in a waking nightmare that had no end. And that's all from today. See you in the next one. Let us know in the comments if you have had any similar experiences.